All right, I want to continue talking about acidity, pH, blood acidity, calcium, and phosphorus, and how all this relates to the degenerative breakdown process, the breakdown process in general, and how it relates to brittle bones and osteoporosis specifically. Quick review: pH is a measurement of how acid or non-acid a water-based liquid is. 0 to 7 is considered acidic, 7 is considered neutral, water is the classic example, and 7 to 14 is considered alkaline. The pH scale goes from 0 to 14. The lower numbers are acidic, the higher numbers are alkaline. Acid means electricity ejecting, electricity spewing, electricity excreting, and alkaline means the opposite. Alkaline means electricity absorbing, electricity sucking. The combination of the two, acid electricity ejecting and electricity sucking or electricity absorbing, creates what we call a current. In a healthy body, the blood will be slightly alkaline or energy absorbing. The inside of cells will be the opposite. The inside of cells will be slightly acidic. So the blood should be slightly alkaline, the inside of cells should be slightly acidic, and the two together create a current. The slightly acidic nature of the inside of a cell is extremely, extremely important when it comes to bone health, when it comes to calcium, and when it comes to phosphorus. And we're going to talk about this here in a moment. This acidic nature of the cells plays an absolutely vital role when it comes to the breakdown of the body, when it comes to inflammation, when it comes to inflammatory disease. Inflammation means a clogging, a blocking. Inflammation means cells aren't getting fed. There's a damming up of the area around a cell. That means cells aren't going to get fed. That means cells aren't going to get oxygen. And that ultimately means that cells aren't going to be able to do their business. That means muscle cells aren't going to contract. That means nerve cells aren't going to fire. That means intestinal cells aren't going to absorb. That means thyroid cells aren't going to make thyroid hormone. Pancreatic cells won't make insulin, etc., etc. So when the area around a cell gets inflamed, gets blocked, cells begin to suffer. And this is all following a lack of nutrition and a lack of oxygen. Inflammation around a cell is secondary to a lack of the mighty 90, a lack of nutrition, and a lack of oxygen. Cells become sick. Even worse, when cells become sick, basically from this lack of nutrients and lack of oxygen, from our crappy diets and our poor breathing techniques, they begin to take on water. They get soggy. And over time, if these cells are starved and they're suffocated long enough, they begin to accumulate acid wastes. And these acid wastes can start to leak out in the blood. If cells become starved and they become suffocated and they become soggy long enough, they will actually burst and spew out a whole bunch of acid into the blood. And now we have even bigger problems. The alkaline nature of the blood assures that minerals and calcium and phosphorus are going to get pushed into the cells. But if the blood is acid, calcium and phosphorus are going to come out of the cells. They're not going to stay in the cells, and then they're going to start to accumulate in the blood. And this is where big problems begin, especially when it comes to osteoporosis. When you think about osteoporosis, you want to think about acidic blood. We hear a lot about acid blood and alkalinization of the blood, and that's because acid is a sign of breakdown. Acid in the blood is a sign of breakdown. When the blood becomes acidic, that means something's wrong. That means something's breaking down. Blood is not supposed to be acidic. It's supposed to be alkaline. Now, the blood doesn't have to be frankly acidic. It doesn't have to be below pH 7. It could be slightly acidic. It could be something like 7.2. The blood has to be kept at a pH of 7.38. That's pretty specific, and there's a reason for that. 7.37 instead of 7.38 makes a big difference. All right, hang tight. We'll continue this discussion when we come back from our break. Okay, let's see. Osteoporosis, acid blood. If you're dealing with osteoporosis, you'll want to think of acid blood. And acid blood means inflammation. It means breakdown. It means something's going wrong. And when I say acid blood, I'm not necessarily talking about frank, full-out acidity. Remember, acid means below pH of 7. If your blood gets below pH of 7, that's some serious, serious problems. But you don't have to be below pH of 7. You could be just slightly acidic. slightly under 7.38, 7.32, 7.34. That's considered acidic, and acidic blood, relatively acidic blood anyway, is a classic manifestation of inflammation, of disease, and ultimately of cell death. Cells are dying. Whatever. Something's wrong. Blood acidity and pH are tightly regulated. It takes a lot to throw it off. The homeostatic, thermostat-like mechanisms are usually pretty darn good. If your acid-base thermostat is messed up, that means something is seriously amiss. One of the biggest potential causes of acidic blood is poor oxygenation. Oxygen is alkaline. That's one of the main roles of oxygen, is to keep the blood alkaline. Oxygen is like an electricity vacuum. If you have COPD, if you have respiratory problems, if you're smoking, or if you're just not breathing effectively, over time we learn to contract our body, and little pockets of hypoxia or anoxia, low oxygen concentration start to accumulate. You can ultimately create an acidic condition in the blood. Fast, shallow breathing is a great way to create an acidic environment in the blood. Conversely, slow, deep breathing can help relieve an acidic condition in the blood. The kidneys play a super important role in clearing acid. Kidney disease, diabetes, anything that goes wrong with the kidneys, any disruption in kidney function can result in elevated blood acids too. Diabetics, pre-diabetics, most of us are pre-diabetic to some extent or another. All of us who have blood sugar issues can have problems with kidney clearance of acidity. That's why one of the byproducts of one of the side effects of diabetes is chronic kidney stones, chronic calcium stones. One of the byproducts of impaired sugar metabolism is acid. In combination with disturbances in kidney clearance of acid, this can result in a drop in blood pH, increased acidity. It's also possible, although somewhat controversial, that the digestive system can play a role in blood acidity. Imbalances in gut bacteria, intestinal permeability, leaky gut syndrome, all of these may play a role in dropping blood pH. Then there's the whole issue of foods. According to Dr. Robert Young in his book, The pH Miracle, eating excessive amounts of meat and dairy, which leave a residual acid after their process, what's called an acidic ash. This can have an important role in lowering blood pH. Now, whether or not this is the case is up for debate. As we said, blood pH is tightly regulated, so there is some controversy on whether or not foods can actually cause your blood pH to drop. According to Sally Fallon of the Weston Price Foundation, it's not so much the meat and the eggs and the high protein as it is the lack of alkalinizing minerals and micronutrients in the standard American diet that accounts for the food effects on blood acidity. According to Ms. Fallon, Eskimos and indigenous populations that subsist on meat show no signs of acidosis. She wrote an article actually in the December 2008 edition of Nourished magazine where she talks about testing the pH of her dog, whose diet consisted of only meat and bones, and she found that the dog's pH was alkaline. So whether or not it's food or foods can play a role is up for debate, but the point is, the bottom line is, over time, with aging, with disease, with inflammation, with poor oxygenation, with poor sugar control, with too much sugar, maybe with bad food choices, over time, the blood will become acidic, slightly acidic or more acidic. For whatever reason, it's a sign that we're messed up, that our biochemistry is messed up. Now, here's the problem, and here's how it relates to osteoporosis, and here's how it relates to poor health. Over time, the acidic blood conditions can lead to phosphates, which live inside cells and are supposed to stay in cells. It can lead to phosphates leaking out of cells to help balance the blood acidity. Phosphates are typically staying inside cells. They stay inside cells for a good reason, because they are a key source of cell energy. But over time, as the blood becomes acidic, the phosphates will leak out of the blood in an attempt to counteract that blood acidity. And the net result is a 1-2 punch of poor health. First of all, elevated phosphates in the blood can mess up calcium metabolism. Calcium is attracted to phosphates, and as those phosphates leak out of the cells to help neutralize that acid in the blood, calcium will tag along with it, because calcium is attracted to phosphates. That means calcium is going to leak out of cells, and it can leak out of bone cells. That means if you just take calcium supplements because you think calcium is important for your bones, which it is, the calcium may not make it into the cells. And if you're taking calcium supplements but your blood is acidic, that means calcium could very well begin to accumulate in the blood. Now, the kidneys typically are going to clear out that excess calcium, but if you're dealing with kidney problems, and many of us are, or if your kidneys are overloaded, now that calcium can very well begin to deposit in tissues, in the heart, in the brain. It can get deposited in blood vessels, and on top of everything else, it can start to clog up the kidneys. Any issues of calcification, any issues of calcium stones should be regarded as a potential sign that you are becoming acidic, that your blood is becoming acidic. And to compound this whole process, because phosphates inside a cell play such an important role in keeping the cell healthy, because phosphates play such an important role in keeping the cell's machinery running effectively, as the phosphates are leaking out, now your cells are going to operate, your cell functioning is going to drop. You're going to have these poorly functioning cells. Your cells are going to start to take on water. They're going to become soggy. This will eventually kill the cell. The cell's going to spew its contents into the blood. You get more inflammation. You get more acidity. And you get this vicious downward spiral. Even worse. Yes, it gets even worse. Calcium is involved in blood clotting. So as calcium starts to build up in the blood will have a tendency to clot, and now you got even more problems. And this can cause more phosphates to leak out. This can cause further disruptions in calcium metabolism. This can further weaken bone. You can see what a mess this gets. This can turn into. If you're confused, to simplify, the take-home message is this. If you are dealing with any calcium issue, if you're dealing with calcification, if you're dealing with stones, if you're dealing with osteoporosis, you want to focus on blood acidity.